You are now tuned in to the Cosmic Convos podcast, your number one source for accurate, relevant, and thought-provoking astrological conversations in the podcast nation. The place where stars and minds align.
Let's get it. So, peace. You are now tuned into the Cosmic Convos podcast. I'm your humble host, Harut, and we got my good brother here, Brother Ra. How you doing?
Brother, living and learning, enjoying life. How about yourself?
Can't complain, man. Just, getting it in day by day. And, I'm trying to get like you, Brother Ra.
Oh, brother. I wish I had it like you, my friend. Got all kind of magic tricks in your goodie bag, brother.
Man, indeed. But, before we get too far, I wanted to remind you all that this episode is brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group and Caliprucia Astrology and our good people over on Patreon. And this week, the people on Patreon are able to tune in live for this episode. So I see the people out there, man. Shout out to the patrons, man. And like I said, we're trialing this out. We're doing something a little different. And go ahead and type your questions in the chat. I could see them. I could see y'all also. You can type a couple questions in, and we'll definitely answer your questions. Most likely at the end, if you ask something and it's relevant, we'll tune it in the show. But we'll definitely get your questions in at the end or whatnot. So this is part of you hit us up on Patreon, man. We you get to try out all the new goodies.
What it is.
Indeed. So you can get with Push It Forward Media Group on Instagram at Push It Forward. That's PUSHITFWD. And you can find us on the web, same as the Instagram handle. And you can also, when you go to pushitforward.com, you can navigate the Cosmic Convos podcast, and you can listen to the podcast there, and you can put in, your order for your Vedic astrology chart package, and we're giving a great deal on that for what you get. A lot of people you're getting into this stuff, and you're seeing all these different charts and stuff like that. You can hit us up, and you can definitely get that information for an excellent price. And on another note, if you're interested in consultations and classes, Brother Ra, how can the people get a hold of you?
Oh, yeah, you can hit me up 3 basic ways. Caliprucia Astrology at gmail.com. That's my main vein. Then you can hit me up on IG or Facebook via Shechem Ra. So one of those will definitely get at me.
Indeed. So yeah, we're here at episode 19, season 2. We're cranking this thing out. I got a lot of real good feedback on the last episode. How about yourself?
Same here, my friend. Everybody seemed to be quite informed by the information we threw at them. So I hope this one goes the same length, goes just as hard, because we got some good information today too.
Yeah, it's an important one. It's especially to just the contemporary kind of astrology, dabblers out there.
Mm-hmm.
Just how we've been, brought up in the West. We're trained to look at one particular measurement. And this one kind of gets a bit of a interesting, backseat. But I'm pretty sure today we're gonna offer some, a position on this to really show the importance of this particular measurement. or whatnot. Before we get rolling though, do want to get a couple, pre Patreon questions. You ready to answer some questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so we got one. Brother wanted to know, do we have the information to be able to analyze the age of Aries from the perspective of nakshatras like we did in the Pisces episode?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Without a doubt. That's available. I mean, each age is 2,160 years. And so it's all measurement, right? 30 degrees equals that amount. So we could take a nakshatra, which is 13 degrees, 20 minutes, and break that down according to the time scale between from one aspect to the next. Definitely easily doable. But I think the real kind of juxtaposition is kind of understanding the Aryan energy in and of itself,
That's a documentary.
It really is.
That's a documentary.
That's a lot of information. I mean, it's not going to say a lot of information, but each one of these subjects is arcane and vast. So, for what we compact in this little bit of time, we could really make a show out of these things, like literally a series, like you were saying, on one thing, right? The age of Aries, and busting up and showing how each particular nakshatra from Kritika, to Baharani to Ashwini, absolutely. And if just as a side note, I mean, if you think about it, Ashwini, right, is between Ashwini and Pisces is a Gandanta, right, zone, or basically an area that doesn't bridge. There's no nakshatra that bridges the water signs and the fire signs. So it's considered like a drop-off zone, right? It's like coming to a cliff and going down into a waterfall and landing into whatever's on the bottom, right? It's the same energy. And so if you just take a quick note of what happened between maybe 100, I don't want to say 100, but right around the time when the Christian church began to take over, that's when that flux would have switched between the Aryan age, right, and the Piscean age. And so that is easy to see when, and this period would have been during the Christian process where the Romans were, I guess, quote unquote, and this is all conjecture because I haven't done too much research on if that's true, because there's other sides that say that the Christians were doing a lot of the fighting. But nonetheless, at that time, right, the powers that be were in flux. Their power was leaving. It was waning, right? So you have the actual Roman Empire, which is now falling and changing into the Holy Roman Empire, right? And so, Nero, all of those like kind of wild, fiery-eyed Caesars at the time, right? Yeah. Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, all of this, right? If you look in history, that point in time was a big nexus point, right? When a lot of things were moving, changing, and shifting, right? Egypt was giving up its goods Egypt was the breadbasket of Rome. Mm-hmm. Greece had been conquered recently by Rome. I mean, the Roman Empire was, for the most part, the United States of its heyday. And so, understanding that time zone between, quote unquote, I don't want to say the birth of Christ, because that's something never happened, but from the time when the Catholic Church, not Catholic Church, but the church really began to gain momentum, and Constantine made the declaration that we'll conquer by this symbol. That is that time frame, right, when that Aries is switching over to Pisces. And so that we can easily see that is the Ashwini nakshatra, and Ashwini is extremely warlike and fast, right? Yeah. It's the quickest of all the nakshatras is Ashwini, right? In fact, its symbol is a horse-headed woman, right? So, right, most race car drivers, people like that really like the need for speed, have that energy very prominent in their chart. And so Ashwini, that aspect when things switched over so quickly and there was so much of a pinpoint of energy, right? Then that shift over into the Piscean age is what you see kind of as the residual that we're kind of dealing with now in the Christian era and so forth. So I hope that kind of touches on it a little bit. But again, we could spend, literally hours and hours just on breaking that information down. So hopefully that helps.
Speaking of that Gardanta point, man, we about to go through some major Gardanta transits, coming up in the next month or so. Mars about to get busy.
Yeah, Mars is about to.
And K2.
Yeah, Mars is going to switch over because he's going to do a little dance, right?
Yeah.
He's going to go into Aries, right? And then he's going to go back, right, into Pisces. And then he'll be back in the Aries in December as of December 23rd, right? So he goes into Aries right around, August 16th, right?
Yeah.
And then I think he goes into Pisces, right around October 3rd, right? So you'll notice right when October 3rd hits that Gandanta zone, between October 3rd and August 16th, that's that zone, right? That back and forth. And then finally, when he's in Pisces and finish doing his thing, and he goes back, he'll be back in the Aries as of December 23rd. So this is a hot zone, right?
Yeah.
It's a major kind of.
And somebody mentioned, and the sun hits Gardanta too, right around this time too. From Cancer. Cancer and Leo.
Yeah. Well, that's August 16th, right? Exactly. It's the exact same day, right? Yeah. So Leo actually, well, there's 3 planets that move over on August 16th. Sun, Mars, and Mercury all move into Leo. I'm sorry. All enter into Gandanta zones. So the Cancerian Gandanta zone is Sun, Mercury, and then Mars is at Pisces and Arian Gandanta zone. So definitely, yeah, it's a couple things happening right now that's coming up. But the real thing that we kind of already talked about it is what's coming up here in the next few months, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be quite interesting, though, knowing that the election that's coming up here is going to be quite a show. It's going to be a show. It's going to be something. Everything this year you can see has been right.
Yeah.
Because you have to take into. I mean, all of this is COVID, man. I mean, you got to understand, voting and COVID. They don't even have enough workers. I don't know if you. A lot of our patrons or our listeners follow the news a lot, but as a diviner and astrologer, I stay constantly tuned in. But they were showing on a report that they don't even have enough workers to work the actual polls because the workers don't want to work, right? Because of the fear of COVID.
Especially November. And November is going to be...
I'm just saying, right? It's going to be interesting. And Mars, going back and forth between that, kind of what if fanciful, ungrounded energy of Pisces, and then into the automatic, makeshift, energetic, initiatic drive of Aries, and then back again, right? That leaves a lot of instability as far as making clear-cut decisions in your life. That's what Mars is all about.
Yeah.
His ability to live in that moment and to be okay with the decision in that moment. So are you going to reopen schools or are you not? That's what you're seeing kind of right now because Mars is in that Piscean energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some schools are open, some schools are closed, right? Some schools are going to do even jobs, right? There's jobs, I mean, there's just the martial energy likes to be direct, it likes to be focused, it likes to be unemotional, right? And so that Piscean energy is destabilizing it, right? It's causing it to feel inspired one minute and then concerned the next, right? Because that dualistic sign doesn't, Mars doesn't do well in any dualistic sign, right?
Mm-hmm.
Meaning any mutable sign. And so when you know that, right, then you can kind of see, wow, right? Mars is kind of, in that position where it makes us feel as if taking action, right, is going to have some automatic recompense later on, right? Or taking action may not be adequate, or taking action may is confused, right? So when you get into Aries, then you want to take action, you're ready to take action, but then at that point, it's going to be slowing down slowly. And then right September 23rd, retrograde, right? And so when Mars begins to go backward, right, we beat up on ourselves. We don't have that self-confidence. We don't have that leap forward energy to get things done. And so you're going to see a lot of people are going to cower in and pull in, right, because of that energy. Right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be quite interesting to see, definitely.
Indeed. So, with all that being said, man, let's go ahead and, jump into the day's topic, right?
Let's do it.
I thought we already hit it, but we didn't. We haven't done.
I thought we did, but we mentioned so many other things. It always ties in anyway. Right?
Yeah.
So.
Indeed. So, today, we're going to talk about the moon.
Right.
The importance of the moon, in the chart, and like I was alluding to earlier, was that growing up in the West, everybody is fixated on the sun sign. Which is sign, and it's the sun gets a lot of credit for a whole lot of stuff. That's when it comes down to Western astrology. But just from my experience and my own chart and looking at a bunch of charts is usually a reach. Sometimes some of the things that's attributed to that sun sign, not even taking in consideration the fact that it's we're using a different measurement than what they are. But what's your thoughts on that? Just how those measurements have been presented, and then we could just go ahead and just get into the moon and what it significates in a chart.
Yeah, so let's talk about it. Right. So remember, we did a show in fact, in the Aryan show, we talked about the Eastern versus Western kind of purview.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the Eastern purview, to me, right, is one where male and female are balanced. Right.
Yeah.
But to the West, it would seem that it's feminine or has a feminine kind of backdrop, because in the East, the feminine goddess archetype is always personified and venerated, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in the East, the woman is not someone that is a mystery or to be looked upon as something as lesser than, or someone or some aspect of humanity that is beneath man. It's a co-partnership type deal. Yeah. Okay. Look, I understand, right? A lot of old habits, a lot of old mentalities are still in the East, because women aren't always lifted to the highest level, as in we now say that the West has equalized the playing field, right? But in the East, truly, the woman was truly venerated in the sense that the goddess archetype was understood to have the Shakti, or the power that God needs in order to manifest in this world. And that is true.
Yeah.
I don't care how many seeds a man can spill. It doesn't matter if it doesn't hit fertile ground. Right.
Yeah.
And so everything in the West is the very antithesis, where the male energy is dominating, where the father, right, the patriarchal purview of governance and spirituality is pervasive. And so when you have that, it makes sense for a society to lean towards the energy that would be masculine and hot and dominating and controlling and so forth, whereas the feminine is not so recognized or venerated.
Yeah.
Right? And so it is denigrated, it's lowered to a lesser status. It's not looked upon as important. It's not looked upon as something that can be used to help structure society, right? It's all the father, male, son energy. Well, actually, the opposite is true, right? Right? Females
his
are the
eyes
ones that
on the
structure.
sparrow.
Right.
Right. He.
Yeah, the female is the basis of society, right? And all structures that we have today, right, are pretty much based on her cycles. In fact, how long do the kids go to school in the West?
How many hours?
9 months, right?
Oh, yeah, 9 months.
9
Yeah.
months, right? The essence of that is, of course, agricultural, but also agricultural is tied into the lunar cycles.
Yep.
So even understanding how society works at the base level is still feminine, right? It's just masculine dominant. So in the West, the sun, right, is all of that. You can tell everything by the sun, which is the furthest from the truth.
Mm.
How many people have the same birthday as you, right? Quite a few.
Yeah,
And they're all very different from you.
absolutely.
So, taking that into consideration, and not only that, to add in that the dates, the information, the degrees are off by 24 degrees. So
Hmm.
that also adds into another level of confusion.
Yep.
And so understanding how this works, we have to pull back, right? And take a purview of what is really the way we should be looking at this and reading it properly as far as astrology is concerned. So the sun, right, is important because it's a time clock, right? It
Hmm.
represents 1 degree every day, right? It
Yep.
does not change, it does not stop, it does not deviate, right? The moon does. So the
Hmm.
sun has a very important purpose as far as timekeeping and making sure things are orderly, which is what the sun represents anyway. Orderliness, right? Control, right? Governance.
Yeah.
So with the moon, right? She varies a little more. Of course, she's consistent too, right?
Hmm.
But she can't keep time by the moon, right?
No.
Right. I mean, and considering in Kemet, right, and in other ancient cultures, I don't want to just venerate Kemet to the point where it's Kemet, because there's other cultures as well. But nonetheless, in Kemet, right, we created sundials, right? And sundials were used in other cultures too, but our sundials were, I mean, kind of top of the line, technologically speaking, right? You could really use them to gauge the time of the day. And of course, when that didn't work, guess what we used? We used a water clock. And water clocks are, by the drip, right? They would time it that way.
Hmm.
But nonetheless, water is feminine, right? So when the
Hmm.
sun goes down, you still got to use some feminine energy, right, to kind of keep a beat on things. So nonetheless, in the East, right, the moon, right, is where we look to get the personality type, not the sun.
Yeah.
Again, like I said, the sun. I don't know how many people got your birthday, but I know a lot of famous people got mine, and they're not even close to being who I am, right? So
Yeah.
that doesn't really work. So we have
Yeah.
to have something that is a little bit more, a lot more actually, tangible, right? In fact, something that we can even touch if we had enough fuel power. Now I know people say, "Oh man, never went to the moon and all that." All right, I'm not going to argue that point today, right?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, right, I would acknowledge at some point, maybe not when they presented it, maybe not, who's to say, but we have been there, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the moon is tangible, it's touchable, right? It's palatable. You can feel it. You can feel the sun, of course, the heat from the sun, but I'm talking about when you're really sitting out on a cool night, when it's a clear night, you can feel the cool vibes, cool chi from the moon, right?
Yeah.
And so that cool energy, right, is actually responsible for the growth of plants and vegetation. It's responsible for the tides of the oceans, right?
Yeah.
There's statistics and studies that show that on full moons, right, it's unwise to do surgery because you bleed more.
Hmm.
This is statistical fact, right? You
Yeah.
go look it up and see. Wow. So if you ever wonder, and you got maybe a surgery coming up, and you see it's a full moon, don't go to surgery, right? Better to have surgery during the waxing phase than the waning phase, right? Because the moon also rules blood, right? Yes, I know Mars rules the actual hemoglobin in blood, but I'm talking about the actual fluid. The moon rules fluids,
Yeah.
right? Your blood is saline, right? It has a saline quality to it, like salt water, right? So the consistency of your blood is still governed by the planet that pulls right, and pushes and manipulates the waters on this planet, right?
Yeah.
So the moon, right, is so important in Jyotish that it gains the status of having its own chart called the Chandra Lagna, right? And
Yeah.
so it's that important in the sense that just like we can use the ascendant, and we should be using the ascendant all the time as much as possible. That should be the primary go-to, not the lunar chart, but the ascendant, right? But for all intents and purposes, the ascendant is conjunct with the lunar or the Chandra Lagna, right? The lunar chart. And so we read them in a symbiotic way to get a full picture of how you are.
Yeah.
We can't really do it with we can do it with the ascendant to a great degree, right? But the ascendant represents certain spiritual aspects of you, where the moon represents other spiritual aspects. And people would ask, well, what are those, right? And so the moon represents your astral body, right? It represents that part of you. It's called the Manomaya Kosha, right? In the Hindu or Bharatian literature. And so it represents an actual part of your spiritual makeup. Literally, you have different bodies, right? This physical body is just one body. You have a causal body, and the causal body is represented by the sun in your chart, right? So you have a physical body, you have an astral body, you have a causal body, right? And there's other bodies too. You have a pranamaya kosha, you have other layers. But for just basic kind of breaking it down, right? You have a body, mind, and soul, right?
Yeah.
Well, the body is kind of an automaton, right? For the most part, it has a mind of its own, right? The body has a mind of its own. The people say, no, it doesn't. Yeah, it does. You don't heal yourself. You don't digest your food. You don't beat your heart. You don't, right? You don't do any of those things. It's all automatic. It has a mind of its own, right? And that is what the ascendant/ascendant Lord represents. The whole complex of the ascendant, because it's not just the ascendant. There's the ascendant degree, there's the ascendant Lord, there's where the house, the sign, all of those things impact the ascendant. So when we say ascendant, I don't just mean that specific date, time, and place. I mean, there's a whole complex that goes with it. But the moon has a complex that goes with it too.
Yeah.
And so the moon is, and for this is what we must understand. The moon is the fastest moving planet in astrology, right? So it represents the constant pulse and change of your chart of life, right? Every day the moon is different. Every day, right? Every day the moon changes something about itself, right?
Yeah.
Being the fastest moving planet, it represents that part of us we call our mind. Right? And they say your mind changes quite often. Right?
Absolutely.
Momentarily, so. And we're going to talk about a little bit about what that is and what the moon really is, right? So people can understand.
Absolutely.
So the moon has some pretty phenomenal things that are attached to it in astrology. One of which we use the moon to gauge another level of your personality. Now, hey, let's talk before I even go there. Let's say this, right? Let's break it down. So the moon, right, provides, right, a substratum that we use in astrology called the nakshatras.
Yeah.
Right. And that substratum, or that layer that we read underneath the chart, or underneath the signs, underneath the rashis, right? That layer, right, is facilitated by the placements of the moon.
Yeah.
So the moon moves 13 degrees, 20 minutes every day, like a clock, right? 13 degrees, 20 minutes, 13 degrees, 20. And it does have some small variances, but not much, right?
Yeah.
Pretty much consistent. So the moon moves 13 degrees every day. Well, the ancients said, you know what, since it moves that amount per day, right, then that particular block, and those are connected to actual stars, right? Constellations. Then they take that block and say, well, that portion of that particular sign has a whole kind of separate undertone to it, right? And so there's 27 of those different undertones because it takes almost 28 days for the moon to create a lunar cycle.
Yeah.
So 27 days or 28, we do, some people say there's 28, 27, but it's a nominal argument, right?
Yeah.
27 is what we use, but that 13 degrees, 20 minutes, right, every day creates a slot. And that slot, wherever something lands, will register and grow because the moon is responsible for growth, right? Whatever is in that slot grows out of that particular, right, zone, which we call a nakshatra.
Yeah.
Now, going deeper, right, because the moon has other layers and other aspects to look at it from. These are when I say complex, this is what I mean. So the lunar complex is not only the Chandra Lagna, but where the moon is placed, literally the nakshatra that it's placed. That is another defining factor. Not only the sign, but the nakshatra.
Yeah.
And so what this science does, it takes it and just reduces it to the essence of what it is. And that's why it's so much more powerful than Western astrology, in my estimation.
Yeah.
So the moon now, since we've got nakshatras, we've got 27 different positions that we can extract deeper meaning out of, not only from the base sign, but from the nakshatra. Now, it goes even deeper. It takes a level and it goes to taking the moon and understanding that the relationship between it and the sun, every day it moves from the sun, right, 12 degrees.
Yeah.
And that 12 degrees, right, 12 degrees, right? That creates what it's called a tithi, Thithi. Tithi. Tithi is another sliver, right? Or another way we actualize your personality. So, 15 of them, right? There's 15 different ones that we look at. Each one, so if you're born on a full moon, that's called Purnima. Purnima has a specific disposition to it, right? A very specific disposition. Purnima has a power that goes with it, right? And so it's not just, that your moon is full. It means that you have a whole set of personality dispositions that comes along with having that moon full, right? For example, like when the moon is full, right, the person typically has a very bright mind, right? Their emotions are usually fairly calm, depending, again, if other planets are imposing. I mean, the moon is the most sensitive planet of all the planets, right? The most sensitive. But they're definitely, right, they're good in relationships. They have an abundance of things. They're very lucky, right? Things fall in their lap without them really reaching very much for it. And if you think about it, because of that brightness that the moon represents in that person's chart, they take on that brightness. They take on that reflective quality that literally says, hey, you know what, you can't get me down. You can't really stop me. I'm going to get it. They do have some emotional battles sometimes because they can get very emotional, but the emotions typically bounce back very quickly, right? They don't like to take orders either, though, because they do recognize that they have their mind is full. Right? So understanding that, right? That's when we begin to understand that, the moon is very precious in our ability to estimate the characteristics of an individual. It goes even further, right? And that's why I was so fascinated by this science, because they take one thing and they really take it to the nth degree. Right?
Yeah.
So there's a next level called a Karana. Our Karana is 6 degrees. It's the amount of space between when the sun moves and the moon moves 6 degrees. So it's half of a tithi, right? And so they take that half and they further analyze your personality disposition. So we have all of that, right, to understand exactly who you are just from the moon. The sun, you can't do that with. You can't do that with the ascendant, right? So the moon is very, very special in the depth and the ability to provide a very well-rounded analysis of an individual's personality type. In fact, in Kemet, another way to understand it is that you have, what's called the Ka, right?
Yeah.
The Ka is connected to the moon, right? So your doppelganger, your astral body, right? When you go to sleep, the you that's you, right? That's the moon, right? When you literally vacate this vehicle, that what we, in the movies, they call it your residual self-image in the Matrix, right? But in your in your life, right, that's your astral body. And so when you leave, that still has a matrix. It still has a constituency to it, and it leaves and dies off after some time. But that astral body, right, is able to travel, do things. It's what you use. It's what a lot of magicians and spiritual masters use to send you messages, right, in your dreams, right, right. So, because you have a life in your dreams, right? Have you ever noticed you sometimes have a reoccurring theme in your dream? Like it's kind of like similar in some way, right? Like this is weird.
I got
right?
Yeah.
Right? The dream world is a whole, and that's the moon, right? And so let's unpack it, right, to understand what it is. So the one thing about Jyotish, right, and I'll brag on this stuff until the cows come home, because it really is the defining points of the sciences as far as astrology is concerned. But there's a yogic science that's aligned to science. It's not just because we read astrology and we know. No, there's a yogic system that we go to analyze what we're looking at when we look at you. And so there's three components to the moon. Most astrologers but most won't tell you about, right? And there's three components that we break down. Number one is called manas, Manas, right? Another one is called chitta, Chitta, and the other one is called ahamkara, right? Ahamkara, ahamkara, right? These are three aspects of what make up the moon. So the first aspect is called manas, which is the sensory filtering processing unit that we call the mind, right? And so what it does is basically it provides a screen, right, for things to come up. So when the senses send data up, right, the screen, right, which you call your mind, right, has to register and do something with this information, right? And so any type of, it's kind of like a circuit board, right? Or like it kind of directs where things should go and what should happen based on this thing that has appeared, whether it be internal or external, right? It's habitual. And so it has no volition of its own. It's automatic, just like the body. So most people think that they're thinking, they're not thinking, not properly, not thinking proper. The other thing is that it's associative, right? So this part of us is associative, meaning that it connects, let's say, cake with fun, right? Or it connects, right? It connects bike riding, right, with childhood, right? This is an associative process. This is what it is. This is what the moon does. It's associative. It has no volition of its own. It's just automatic. It is instinctual, right? And so it doesn't have the ability to truly make decisions. It reacts mechanically to circumstances, right? And so again, right, it's just an instrument. It's really not doing anything, but it's just like a computer.
It's just software. It's like the software
package
you came in with. Yeah.
That's it, right? It can easily be manipulated. Right, it's manipulated from day one. Think about it. For all intents and purposes, the manas, right, which is a sensory filter, says, "Hey, I'm hungry," right, because the stomach's sending up, signals. Some babies sit and they'll, make a little noise or whatever. Da, da, da. Some babies cry to you can't stand it anymore. Like, oh my God, please, I have to literally breathe to endure this. So help, right? Some children literally cry it's a shrill cry. I don't know if you've heard of shrill cry. Like, oh my God, like let me help this child, right?
Yeah.
Some children, right, kind of temperate, and they'll cry, but they won't, kind of let you know.
Yeah, my daughter get busy like that sometimes. That shrill cry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that it'll just on a man. It sends hairs like up our body, like, oh, we got to do something, right? So, right. But each baby has their own. They're a baby. They have nothing other than hunger, diapers wet, sick, whatever sensory input is coming out. They have to let it out. But isn't it funny that they let it out in different ways already? There's no personality, quote unquote, yet, or is there? Well, there is. That's why the moon is positioned where it is. And so, understanding this, right? Because it reacts to sensory data, right? When you get it, right, then you understand that the moon, let's say the baby has the moon in Virgo, right? Virgo has a emotional need to fuss.
Yeah.
When I say fuss, to fix something. Yeah. Fussing is only because something's wrong. So you're just trying to fix it, right? And so that mental complex, right, that manas, the sensory operating apparatus says, problem, talk, problem, say something, problem, articulate. Well, baby has no words, so it's fussy, right? When you become older, they say, well, use your what?
Words,
right? Well, Virgo has a knack to have to use their words constantly.
Yeah.
Right. But at the baby, at an infantile stage, it was still there. So it came out as crying a lot. Well, they say he was a cry baby. No, his moon's in Virgo. I'm not saying all people with moon and Virgos like that. Trust me.
Don't beat us up.
Yeah, don't run with that. But it does have some validity to it, right?
Yeah.
Because there's other factors that can change a whole lot of things. But you will notice that when the moon is in Virgo, that person has to articulate themselves in some degree, in some way, on a constant basis. Because remember, the moon is what? Cyclical, right? So we know that you have a pattern, a cycle that you run. We call it a script, right?
Yeah.
And priests, you learn how to change and rewrite the script. Right?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's a script. So the script of a Virgo says, hey, I have the emotional need to correct a problem. I have emotional need to tell you something's wrong. I have an emotional need to figure out why things don't feel right.
Yeah.
Right. And that comes off through the planet of Mercury, which gives it articulation. So the baby, right, still has that same moon mental complex, and it has to facilitate that in some way. The moon being in Pisces, very laid back, right? Very reserved, very calm, very passive, right? And then the child maybe doesn't speak as fast. Takes a little longer because the need to express itself is less so because it's more in the spiritual or the internal aspect of things, right?
Yeah.
So maybe the baby's a little bit quieter. Maybe you ever seen the babies that just like look around all day? Like I've seen babies like that's all they do. He's always doing like what's going on? Because some babies are focused. If you ever paid attention, right? Some babies are looking at you. They're looking at that, right? Some babies are like, "Where am I? Like, how did I get here? Like, what's going on?" Yeah, that's that moon in Pisces type disposition.
Yeah,
because it's still kind of this is the astral body. And so the Piscean realm, the Piscean energy is still otherworldly.
Mm-hmm. Man,
so they're still. Go ahead.
I know a baby that's what's it? Her moon's in Sag, and she might. You see her, you don't think she can talk. She'll sit there, she'll look at you and brew, and then just spit out something amazing. You're like, where the heck did that come from? Like that's what she do. She just sit there and study all day. And then she'll spit out an articulate sentence like, where the heck did that come from?
Exactly. Because that's the manas.
Yeah.
It's a sensory filtering mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
So if something comes up, it says, hey, do it this way.
Yep.
Right. Because it's repetitious as well.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's why people have personalities, because they're stuck in that complex.
Yeah.
Right? And so understanding that's one aspect of the mind is manas, the sensory aspect, filtering aspect of it. Right. The next aspect to talk about is what we call chitta. Now, chitta is basically just nothing but memory.
Mm-hmm.
And the moon, right, is responsible. It's kind of like the storehouse for memories. Right. So see how, and this is,
like hard drive.
Kind of, sort of, yeah, like a hard drive. Exactly. I mean, think about it like this, y'all. The moon has three aspects. It's not just the moon. We have manas, which we've talked about as the filtering process. So if it filters, just like any type of glass,
Mm-hmm.
if I put purple over it, it's only going to allow purple light to come through.
Yeah.
Right. If I put green, it's only going to allow green. Right. Well, that's what the manas does. It says red. Right. Red light. So whatever, if sex comes up and red lights there, it's a go. Right. Because the sensory apparatus can say, hey, it's automatic. But if patience comes up and there's a red light, we got a problem. Right.
Yeah.
Red light, you said, means stop, but red light literally just to get your attention. The color red is actually moving. It moves you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that red color, which causes action, right? When you have to process inaction, reservedness, patience, calmness, right? The mind sensory apparatus breaks down.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have, right, an emotional reaction. That's how it works. On the sensor, on the mana side, there's other things, right? With the moon. The next level of the moon we look at is what is called chitta. Now, chitta is the memory storehouse of things. And what we say chitta, it means that not only the memory as in this life, but in past lives too.
Yeah.
Because the moon is the past. That's all it deals in is the past. It doesn't deal in the future.
Yeah.
How do we know? Because the memories are past. There's no future memory. Right? By itself, inherently, it means past.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So because everything is hindsight, they say hindsight is 20/20, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you look back over your life, right, and you see the stages, right, of your development, you'll notice at some point there's a schism when you start to mature, right? You can control the impulses that come through the sensory apparatus, the manas, but they come out of the chitta, which is the memory bank. Right. Now, let's say and now chitta is twofold, right? It's passive and it's passive and active, right? It's passive in the sense that it just throws up memory. So basically, it's just like a screen. It's like all it does is just throws them up.
Yeah.
Right. It just regurgitates it. Just boom, 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 constant, boom, boom. But right, it's all based on what you were imbibed with when you came through. Now, here's how you know karma's real, because you didn't choose that operation when you came in. People say, I chose my life. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You didn't choose your life. You didn't. The choice is our choice is an illusion, first of all, right? There is no choice, right? When we may do a show on fate, right, that has some kind of connotations, karmically speaking.
Yeah.
Right. But they didn't choose that. Not in the sense of choice. See, choice.
Not like you just went, I want my life to be like this and like this. Like it's more like options. Like, this is what you got.
It's like this.
Walk through this door.
It's like this. Either you're reborn or you're reincarnated. Most people are reborn. Most of you didn't reincarnate. Most of you defaulted into this body. And you chose the time to come back to fulfill that need. Yes, but that is automatic as well. See, time is the master key to all things other than consciousness, right? Because consciousness supersedes time.
Yeah.
But time is the next big boy on the block, right? And so time, right, is a window, and it creates a matrix, right? When you enter into it. So it literally organizes everything at once.
Yeah.
And so when you enter in that time, right, you default to the parents that you literally need to facilitate that rebirth process. I didn't say reincarnate. I said rebirth. The difference is when you reincarnate, you are at an advanced stage where you can enter into time instead of defaulting into time. Yeah. If everyone chose, we would have a different world.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, in Kemet, I mean, it's depicted, beautifully. If you don't pass that final judgment, your mind is 8. Your mind is 8. Is 8.
I'm a wit. Pride, right? Yeah. Over emotionalism and outright just being conniving, right? It's gonna take you back. That's the crocodile, the hippo, and the lion. Pride, right? Unemotional. See, the animals, but to kind of break it down to you, the crocodile, he's sly, right? You don't even know he's there until you're big.
Yeah.
Right? So it represents that part of us, that instinctual aspect that literally takes over and causes you to literally react to situations as if you have no mind, right? It's like instant. Pride is another, right? And they always say before fall goes, what does it say? What's the statement? A fall always goes before pride. That's true, because pride makes you insular. You can't receive knowledge. Mm-hmm. And then the hippopotamus, which represents unbridled emotion, because the hippopotamus actually is these are the most 3 dangerous animals in Africa, by the way, y'all. Right? The hippo will take you out faster than a lion will.
You don't want to run with no hippo.
No. Right? Right. So these are vicious animals, right? And it represents that aspect of us, that uncontrolled animalistic part of us, that when you literally live that way, that aspect has to be reborn. Not reincarnated, reborn. You die a second death, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you are reborn, it's kind of like, okay, you defaulted to this. People say that's kind of cold. No, it actually is very merciful, because if you defaulted, and that part of you that understood that default, that entered into that time zone, that consciously did. When we say you consciously entered in, that is what is inherent in kind of what they're talking about choice, because there's a part of you that is conscious before you enter. Yeah. That is turned off, and then you play it out, play your best hand, right? But when you're reincarnated, you choose your parents bring you to a level of self-realization quickly. It happens. And it's in the West, we kind of don't have it too much, but some of us still have it, even though we've kind of come to a Christian paradigm. Some of our parents still have enough to kind of say, you know what, check that out. Even though they may not really say or do it, it's something inherent that you live out through them, that they're living out through you. It just works that way.
Like the life experiences will.
Like my mother's a Christian, right? But before all of that, I saw her, she was into a lot of different stuff. And so that's when I'm like, what's she into? Right? The apple don't never fall too far from the tree, as they say. Right? Yeah. So, if you have a spiritual child, you're usually very spiritual, right? And you usually attract a spiritual mate. I mean, this makes sense, right? Because you're attracting that person, you're bringing them through, right? You're the vehicle, and they're going to come out to continue that spiritual process and work. So that's reincarnation. They're different, right? Most people are reborn. So get that out of your head that you choose, quote unquote, right, to come back. You don't. What you can choose is while you're in life to learn to live properly and leave properly, because there is a way to leave in death. You should die in peace, right? When you are actually at a funeral, there should be no crazy music and no crazy people, right? For black folks, it's kind of hard sometimes, right? Because everybody comes out at the funeral, right?
Yeah.
Right? But it's not only the way you come in, but it's also the way you leave.
Yeah.
And so that's why our ancestors made such a big deal about, right, the death process. But back to the moon, right? So the moon, right, we said is Chitta. Chitta is the memory bank that throws up things. Now, remember I said it's passive and active. When you go to sleep, it becomes what?
Passive. Oh,
you don't make your dreams.
Yeah.
You don't make your dream world. You didn't. I mean, I know you meet different people in your dreams, right? You didn't make these people up. I mean, I'm sorry, y'all. For me, maybe I'm simple, right? Because some of this stuff is just mind blowing to me. But you can't make up your dreams. You can't make up. Now you can take something into your dream, yes, but whatever you take in, the mind is going to arrange that in such a way that it facilitates what it needs to have done based on whatever the dream is, right?
Yeah.
Whatever it is that's taken in, rather. But if you don't take anything in, you still have a dream. And there's a whole slew of things. I mean, think about it. Throughout the conscious day.
Oh, no, I see what you're saying. You're saying the mind is active.
The mind is active.
Yeah,
you are
yeah.
not.
Yeah. Okay.
See, when you're awake, when you're awake, right? That keyword awake, because are you really awake? Right?
Yeah.
Because remember, the manas is constantly running. Manas is constantly running. The mind is constantly running. It constantly goes. When we say manas, we're talking about the mind that is the sensory aspect, the filtering screen. It's always there. Always has something there. Chitta is what is the stuff that comes up on that screen. Right? That's what chitta is. So it's what pops up on the filter screen, right? But if there's no sensory information coming from the outside, that's when it's passive, it turns on and becomes active when the dream state or when sensory deprivation kicks in. Sensory deprivation is an exercise that was experimented on in the 60s and 70s, and especially when the LSD era kind of hit. But what they did was some phenomenal research in that and you should watch a movie called, oh man, it slipped my mind that quick. It'll come back to me. Crazy far out movie, but got some serious truths in it.
You're not talking about
in the 80s.
Oh no, I was thinking about another crazy movie. That's you seen Jim Carrey, Eternal Sunshine, and Spotless Mind.
I've never seen that. No.
It's an interesting movie. It's deep.
In this movie, the guy goes back and he tries to travel to South America to get the secret of ayahuasca. Okay. But this is in the 80s. It's like a real, like a big production movie. But he goes down there, he takes the ayahuasca and it changes his whole. You just have to see the movie, right? But in the movie, they do a lot of testing with sensory deprivation, and sensory deprivation is the same thing as what we call in pratyahara. Pratyahara is a yoga practice where we literally control the sensory apparatus. We concentrate long enough to hold the same thought, right? And exclude all other thoughts, right? But nonetheless, in the system, you have you have manas, you have chitta, which is passive and active. See, manas is passive. All of this is a screen. And that screen can only hold so much at a time. And it can only allow so many thoughts to filter in without having either some resistance or problem. Right? Chitta is what's thrown up. The other aspect of it is called the ahamkara. That is what is called the I-ness principle. And all things have that, right? Because all things have mind, right? But the ahamkara means that you ever see a dog and the dog knows another dog, right? It knows you're a human. It knows that's a cat. It knows that's a dog. But there's no words in the brain of the dog. But there
Yeah.
is a device. There is a mind in the dog. The dog has mind too. That's why you're able to control the dog's mind through your own mind. If you're calm, the dog is calm. If you're heightened, the dog is heightened. Everything's a reflection. Just like, and these little movies that come out. This little Jaden Karate Kid, right? Remember in there, and he had the serpent, and the serpent. He was like, "Nah, the serpent is calm because he's calm." Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the same thing, right? Dogs have a sense of smell that's 400 more times more powerful than you, so they can smell fear.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And literally, if you're calm, your manas, right? I mean, your chitta, your whole mental complex is calmed through the breath, which something outside of that has to do that, and that's a whole nother conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that manas, chitta, ahamkara being calmed down, that process where the thoughts are not coming up as fast, and they're not going down. They're constant. They're coming up, staying, being understood, let go back down. Right. That's the process for meditation. Well, when you're actually in a situation, if you're calm, things that are around you remain calm. Right. That's the understanding that ahamkara, right, is innately in every creature, humans and animals. Right. So that part of us, that complex, the mental complex, which we can break down now into manas, which is the sensory filtering device, right? The chitta, which is the storehouse memories that is active and passive, and the ahamkara, which is the sense of identity or the I-ness, right?
Mm-hmm.
All those things make up the moon in your chart, right? So when we look now, how does that work, right? So let's say the moon is in Capricorn, right? So the moon, remember, is the most sensitive planet of all the planets. Okay? So when we say sensitive, we're saying the moon or that part of us develops a sensitivity to something. And so the moon in Capricorn develops a sensitivity to being serious, to regularity, to rules, to order, right? The ahamkara identifies, right, and says, hey, these sensory apparatuses are what's comfortable for me, because the moon is about comfort, right?
Yeah.
So the comfort zone for me is in orderliness. The comfort zone for me is being serious. That's the comfort zone. You know, people that stay in that zone,
Mm-hmm.
they never come out, right? We're looking at the complex of the moon, right? They're very serious when it comes to getting things done. They're very responsible, right? They have the ability to. They have a propriety sense. They have a propriety sense. They're sensitive to propriety,
Yeah. I
right?
mean, look, I hate to always be talking about my daughter, but she already has a schedule.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, she wakes up at a certain
Our
time.
moon's in cat.
Yep. She wakes up at a certain time.
Mm-hmm.
She eats at this time. She does everything.
Regulated,
Yep.
right? They're very mature. They mature fast, right? They grow up quick. They don't dilly dally, right? And so this, and it also it gives them the power to be industrious too, though, hardworking, disciplined. Well, why? See, the moon represents the part of us. It represents on Earth things that flow, that
Yeah.
have a rhythm, right? And so it represents cycles and habits. It also represents water. And again, we said liquid, right? All these things you need to have life, right? So we could say, in fact, in astrology, we call the moon the Jiva Atma. Jiva means life, living, the living Atma, or the
Yeah.
living aspect of the soul, the living soul, right? It's called Chaya in Hebrew, right? But nonetheless, right? When the moon is actuated by Saturn, Saturn has some specific energetic patterns that affects the moon's processing. And so Saturn is cold.
Mm-hmm.
So when the sensory apparatus receives a message, right? And the message is, I'm hungry, right? Well, Saturn, right, has a threshold to deal with pain a little bit more than other signs. They do without a lot better because Saturn represents scarcity. In fact, because of Saturn's coldness and the moon's like sappy, juicy energy, right? Saturn dries it out. So they become dry in nature.
Mm-hmm.
The moon loses its like juiciness and it becomes drier, it becomes more serious, right? The moon is also slow, right? Saturn is also slow. So Saturn's regulation, right? That slowness, that methodical processing causes the mind to slow down.
Yeah.
But it causes them to think deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Because if your mind is moving slower, the thoughts come up. The chitta releases the thoughts what? Slower.
Mm-hmm.
The manas, which is the screen that says, okay, is it blue or red? Is it green, yellow? What is it? Oh, it's blue. Well, blue matches, right? So we cool, right? There's orderliness. We good. When red comes up, hey, you got to be on order. You got to be on task. There's now a dictatorial process that comes out too.
Yeah.
So understanding that, right? That mind complex, again, manas, chitta, ahamkara, right? And we say ahamkara. Now the person identifies with that and they can say, hey, well, I want to be a lawyer, right? Because the mind registers cold, hard facts.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It remembers those very well, has a keen affinity to acquiesce things that are organized, regulated, right?
Yeah.
So they make very good lawyers, and lawyers become judges, right? They don't mind doing jury duty at all. They probably would like to do it, right? Because they understand and appreciate and reflect, right, that discipline, that orderliness. And so that's how we look at it, right? We know that the chitta releases the thought slowly. We know that the sensory apparatus, which we call the manas, says I can either send or I can accept or reject. I can and then the ahamkara says I identify, right, with that. And so that is the moon in and of itself, right? Again, we could go deeper because whatever is around the moon imbibes. It doesn't have a filter. So if Mars is there, moon picks it up because it's a sensory apparatus device.
Yeah.
It's going to throw up fiery memories of athletic stuff, athleticism, memories of combat, memories of bullies and fighting and all those things. Those are all what the chitta is going to hold. And the mother, which also is represented by the moon,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's going to have that same disposition. So we're seeing not only the person, but we're also seeing the mother. And we can use the Chandra Lagna now to see the mother's life, right? Because the mother is literally the first you, the first aspect of you that you're able to recognize.
Yeah.
The ahamkara, right? The ahamkara says, me, somebody helps me, feeds me, clothes me, mommy.
Yeah.
Right? And it doesn't have to be the physical mother, biological either. It could be anyone that facilitates that role.
Yeah.
It's automatic. It's passive.
Mm-hmm.
See, this is how they get you into church. This is how you some of y'all stuck in the church and eating chitlins and smoking cigarettes and doing all the things that you do, right? Because they know that at a certain age, you are defenseless.
Yeah.
You have no barriers. Your mind is like a sponge. So you're going to absorb and regurgitate, absorb and regurgitate, absorb and regurgitate. And by the time the person's 28, which is when you get your frontal lobes active, it's too late.
Yeah, you locked in.
And then you have to break something to remake something. And the breaking process is usually life events that causes you to realize that ain't working. Right? You got to say, oh, that pattern, which we call the mind, the moon, right, is repeating and it's not working. Then someone has to take the needle up off the handle and reset, right?
Yep.
That is not Manas, the moon. Don't do none of that. That's something else, right? But nonetheless, right, understanding how that works. Now we get a good beat on when we say the moon in the chart, what we mean, right?
Yeah.
What we're looking at, how we read it, right? We also look at the seventh from the moon for your relationships too. Your mate is in the projections of your emotions. The moon is the housing device that projects the emotions. So you are projecting, the moon is whatever is seventh from it is in a 100% aspect from the moon. So it's projecting that, and you get back what you project. So we're saying, hey, in relationships, you're projecting an Aryan disposition because you're trying to conquer. You're trying to run things. You're trying to be the boss. You're trying to be independent. You don't even really want to stick around long enough, right? Well, then you're going to attract someone that tries to counterbalance and show you those dispositions.
Yeah.
Right. So again, right, I think we'll leave it at that. I think we went pretty good to the moon, right? I would say, right, a lot of information has been disclosed, right?
Absolutely.
About the moon mind complex and reading it through, right, a chart. And you go back and you start having fun with it and you say, wow, my daughter, right, her instrument of thinking is designed to deal with things that are reduced. Bare essential, right? Serious to the core. So all the fluff don't move her.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And this is where you'll come in as dad, because dad has got some of that seriousness too. Dad has the ability to say, look, I'm on this path. I have discipline. I do this in a regulated way, right? They appreciate that. They really do. Right? So, and then the thing about it is that the moon in Capricorn, a lot of times will lean towards the father, many times.
Mm-hmm.
Because the mother is already designed and receiving that cold energy, right? Being, at the time, and we say, what else does it mean? At the time, the mother was very serious, meaning she was very responsible. Like, oh my God, I'm about to have a baby. This is going to change my life. I got to wake up. I got to get on it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Mother was that way when the baby popped out. Trust and believe. Right.
Indeed.
Moon in Libra, the mother was in love. She was thinking about the relationship or the mate was in the womb.
Mm-hmm.
Straight up. Right. Just things like that you can gauge, right? Just the moon's placement. So, I mean, again, it's a complex, right? When we say the moon, we're not just saying the moon, we're saying a mind complex when we read astrology. So that's one of the secrets most people don't know. I've never heard of anyone discussing that before in regards to how the mind and the moon works in astrology.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's a deep piece, man. Yeah, I mean, I can't see how you could, be an astrology teacher or a student and just glaze over the moon. Because I think the most common thing that I hear from a lot of Western astrologers is that the moon is like just your what did I say, like your inner thoughts or something like that, or something to that nature is real glossy. I know there's deeper Western astrologers out there, but as far as what's perpetuated, what's out there, It's interesting.
Yeah, I've never heard of a moon chart in Western astrology. Doesn't mean it's not there, but
Yeah.
I've never seen it in vogue.
Yeah.
I've never seen it like unless they are kind of mixing the two. But most of the time, it's the sun sign that holds the key,
Yeah.
right? And that's not true. You don't develop anything. You don't even come on. Okay, you don't have the you until you're 28 years old. That's when you get the ability to use your frontal lobes. It doesn't mean you're using them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because how many times are we doing things to shut them down, to do the very opposite of what we're trying to get to when we get to 28? So by the time you're 20, the diet, the sugar that we've eaten, the tobacco that we smoke, the lack of exercise, lack of rest, proper sleep,
Yeah.
constant stress, decreasing the frontal lobe capacity to some degree to the point where you've given yourself a lobotomy before you've even turned 28 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so when you're 28 and then you wonder why, well, hey, you're grown. They're 35, but they're still acting like they're what? 15.
Yeah.
Because the sensory apparatus has been so damaged and conditioned over time that it can't break that habitual process by realizing that when adversity comes, it's a wake-up call. And they go back to the default zone and they repeat and fail.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a spiritual underlining meaning to Saturn return too, because that means that it's time to break, right? It's time to sever with the childhood apparatus, the moon mental complex, and to wake up to the other part of you, which is the sun sign, which turns on at a later date. Right?
Yeah, there's a, one day, that whole science of, the moon and just it's how it manifests psychologically in people's lives is going to be key. And kind of a lot of the things that we see right now, we're seeing, without getting too specific, but like a full-on embracement of that initial programming, in various aspects of life. That initial programming that people come up with is what they are completely identifying with, and is almost becoming mainstream, academic thought. You know what I'm saying? But I think it them going so hard in that direction, at some point something's gonna boom break that and bring forth the actual truth, because that has a bunch of unintended consequences that we're gonna start seeing in the coming generations.
No doubt. I mean, they say, I mean, it's a premise. I say everything that people preach in religion, it's a premise.
Yeah.
So let's see if your premise is correct.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see if I turn the other cheek, will that change the heart of the individual that I'm dealing with? Not knowing, right, that there are spiritual laws in operation outside of what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
See, that's in the realm of chesed or ma'at, right? And there's a science to that. It's not just you go in and you just turn the other cheek and all that. No, none of that, right? And there's a premise, right? There's a premise that I can pick up snakes, right? And I'm be fine based on the premise that I read in the Bible. The premise said I can hold snakes and cast out demons. Well, you pick it up, you get bit, right? Your premise was wrong, right?
Yeah.
Right. If I take this grape juice and eat this cracker, right, tomorrow I'm gonna have a better life. Right? That premise doesn't seem to be working for 2,000 years. But hey, who am I to argue?
Indeed.
But you know what I mean? That's what you come, in spiritual training, right? You come to live out a premise, right? I'm made in the likeness of a piece that nothing can disturb, right? That's going to be challenged. The premise will be, let's see if the premise is right, but at least the premise is conscientious and is well thought out. Right? And so that leaves a different approach to problem solving when the premise can match something that would require the ability to use that premise and overcome that adversity. Right. So, right. Again, but the mind is the sponge that absorbed that premise at a very early age.
Yeah.
I went to church. I went to 2 churches when I was young for a while, long time. So I went to Pentecostal I went to Catholic church from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. Had a breakfast break from 8 to 9. And from 9 to 12, we were in Pentecostal church.
Man, I
every Sunday. Bible study every Wednesday. Youth night on Friday.
I would have had a hard time growing up in your household, man.
Well, I'm Libra ascendant. So look, Libra ascendant, right? Libra ascendant, their 4th house is Capricorn. And it was no joke. It was orderly, regulated, structured, disciplined. You better not talk back. Children are meant to be seen, not heard, right?
Yeah.
Right? And you better not even think about trying to challenge that order, or you're going to have a major problem. And I understood those rules, and we didn't have a problem.
Yeah, my rival would have been jumping all off.
I got problems when I got older. I said, my Ahamkara and Manas wasn't filtering that. Like, the moon got something else going on, reverse, right?
Yeah.
But nonetheless, right? That's how we grow up, is in that Christian paradigm. And it has premises. You have to live those premises out, whether you get and to use it. And some of the premises work. They do. I'm not going to say all of them are false, but when you start having the premise of Santa Claus, no. You have Easter Bunny and everything else. We know as adults it's not real, right? But again, we feed our children false premises.
Yeah.
And so feeding them false premises, we wonder why they lie. We wonder why they tell tales. Yeah, well, we know, because you were telling the tale to yourself and to me too, right? I was 7, I busted them. I came out like, oh, y'all put it up, huh? Got you. Christmas is done. Right? Premises was busted, right? Automatically. I've had a premise busting childhood constantly, because going up in 2 churches was like, no, they didn't do the same thing over here that y'all doing. Y'all's premises is different, but you say the same thing. So quite interesting, right? But I think at this point, I think we got a good show. I think we've given the people some good information to use, to go off of, and to kind of even apply at some point, looking at their own charts or other people's information.
Absolutely. And the good thing is a lot of the questions were answered just throughout the show. Yeah, pretty much all of them were answered. Everybody who typed in here. Yeah. So yeah, I think we good money, with that being said, I want to remind you all that this episode was brought to you by Push It Forward Media Group and Caliprucia Astrology, and our good people out there on Patreon. For everybody who's still hanging with us on Patreon, let us know, how this format works for you. You know what I mean? If you like it, and stuff like that, man, maybe some tweaks, different things like that we can, apply to this to make this a even better experience and stuff like that. I can say I like it, man. I'm looking here, I see the comment threads and stuff like that. Brother shouting out stuff. Yeah, I mentioned the Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. You should watch it. It's a crazy movie. Somebody, all right, I know who this is. Yeah, he said, yeah, that movie was cray. It's deep. It's deep.
I have to check it out.
Yeah, man. But yeah, man. So, like I said, we're always growing and, kind of enhancing and, just trying to build the podcast out, take it to the next level and stuff like that. Trying to get on Joe Rogan's level.
Hey.
Or whatnot. So,
shoot for the moon and you be amongst the stars. I'm with it. Let's get it.
Indeed. So, if you good, brother Rob, man, I think we can go ahead and close it out right here, right?
Yeah, I'm good.
Indeed. So, we'll be back next week, with another, good show for you. And again, give us your feedback, and let us know you got some other ideas, different things like that, and we'll definitely take them in consideration. All right. So with that being said, we're out. Peace.
Peace.